Hello again, Year 10. So we are carrying on today with our revision of Gerald Croft. Before we start, I have 4 silent do now questions for you. So please pause your screen and have a go at these 4 questions. So let's look at these answers. So we know that when Jacob Marley appears to Scrooge, he is wearing a large, heavy chain that tethers him around the waist. That chain is comprised of cash boxes, keys, padlocks, ledgers, deeds, and heavy steel purses. And what do those things represent? They're all things to do with his business, aren't they? The business of making money and money lending. So they're manifestations or embodiments of Marley's business in life. And these things have become the bonds or the sins that weigh him down for all eternity. He is weighted down and tethered because he was not a better human being in life. So an inspector calls. How does the lighting change when Inspector Gould enters? So at the start of the play, the lighting is rosy pink as the family are dining and having their engagement party. As soon as the inspector walks onto the stage, we are told that the lighting changes to a harsh, bright white. And the change in that lighting conveys that the inspector will put them all under the harsh spotlight of truth. Suddenly the stage is awash with bright, harsh light, and that light represents the truth. If we have a rose-tinted view, we try and look at life in a pretty, positive, fake way. Well, the inspector is not rose-tinted. He sees things clearly and harshly in the bright light of truth. And that's why we have that clever lighting change. So yesterday we started exploring the character of Gerald Croft. We were looking at Priestley's methods to communicate the character of Gerald and the effect and the meaning that those methods create for the audience. Today we're carrying on with that. Yesterday we came to this table at the end. So we know that when we write our English literature essays, we need to talk about the character at the start of the play, in the middle of the play, and at the end of the play. And yesterday we ended our lesson with a summary of what Gerald is like at the start, what Gerald is like in the middle, and then at the end how we see him as very shallow and self-absorbed, more obsessed with himself and his own reputation than having any remorse for how he may have treated Daisy Renton. Make sure you got that information down in your books yesterday. Apologies, I did run out of time yesterday. These were the answers from our 60-second quick thinking recall activity. The fact that Gerald is the son of Lord and Lady Croft. Other information there that we went through. But I just wanted to flash that up to you because I did run out of time yesterday. Apologies. Okay, so today we are going to deepen and strengthen our understanding of Gerald Croft as a character. We always can gain a better understanding of a character from reading what other people say about them, particularly if that other person is a well-known academic writer. So today we are going to look at an academic article from Jill Carter at the Oxford University Press. And in that article, Jill Carter discusses the character of Gerald and she puts forward her views on him. So as we read, we're going to consider Jill Carter's opinion, and we're going to think about whether we agree or disagree. There is a quiz on Teams this week on Gerald, which will be able to test your comprehension of this article, as well as our other work on Gerald Croft. So if you want a link to this article, it's there at the bottom of the screen. But I have it as a resource in this PowerPoint. So we are going to read this together. Everything's All Right Now, Sheila, article from November 2019, and this is what the writer has to say. For me, Gerald Croft is in many ways the most interesting character in An Inspector Calls. His name is well chosen. The word Croft suggests something homely and cosy, but also working class, a direct contrast with the kind of place his family actually occupy in society. Unlike the Burlings, he's genetically rich and privileged. He's a member of the elite aristocracy Mr. Burling so aspires to impress. His first name, Gerald, means ruler, and perhaps this is no coincidence either. Reactions to him are nearly always mixed. We cannot help seeing him in part as the fairy prince. He claims to have rescued Eva, somewhat ironically, from the notorious womanizer Megati. He insisted she move into the rooms at Morgan Terrace, and he insisted on leaving her with a parting gift of money to help her out for a couple of months. It seems that Gerald Croft is very good at insisting on helping out and doling out a degree of generosity. Somehow the character of Gerald taps into our love of the fairy prince, the knight in shining armour, the rescuer, and we are also seduced by his admissions that he's behaved badly and that he didn't mean to hurt anyone. Easily said after the event. In truth, he's exploitative, untrustworthy and careless with the feelings of others. He provides the evidence that women in society simply had to accept the way they were treated by men. He takes advantage of Eva, who can do nothing when he chooses to drop her, and he abuses his relationship with Sheila, who even takes the blame on herself for his actions. It was my fault, really, that she was so desperate when you first met her. It's a giveaway when Gerald says, I didn't install her there so I could make love to her. The words install her there reflect his dominant attitude to women in general, and it's clear that he did intend to make her his mistress. He presents himself as the rescuer, responding gallantly to Eva's cry for help in the palace bar. He says he told the girl she'd better let me take her out of there. Again, his use of language reveals his character. He is used to telling people what to do, and the phrase "the girl" seems disdainful, given his relationship with her. He goes on to claim that she was intensely grateful to him. Priestley wants us to see that vulnerable working-class women had little recourse to anything other than charity, for which they were supposed to be thankful. Gerald believes his largesse somehow justifies his exploitive behaviour, even though he would have known full well that he would be unable to sustain the relationship for long. It's when Gerald excuses himself, claiming to be rather more upset by this business than I probably appear to be, that we see he's definitely not all he appears to be. Despite being upset and wanting time alone, he manages to find out that the inspector isn't a real police officer and that they have been had. He returns to triumphantly suggest that they all saw photos of different girls, as if this somehow makes their actions less despicable. Gerald's last words in the play are, "Everything all right now, Sheila?" holding up the ring. "What about this ring?" The fairy prince is quick to forget his part in Eva's life and to brandish a sparkling future for them all. Now, I would suggest that you read that again in your own time, in your own pace. So before we do, I'm going to point out some words there that we might not understand. So genetically rich means he's inherited his wealth. The elite aristocracy are those upper classes. What else do we have? A womanizer, somebody who sleeps with and makes his way through a lot of women. Where else have we got some of these words here? His largesse, where is that? There we go. Gerald believes his largesse somehow justifies. Largesse means generosity. Generosity usually from someone higher up. And finally, there is another word. Where is it? Despicable. That means hateful. So I would suggest that you pause the slide and you go through this article yourself in your own time, and you ask yourself, to what extent do you agree with the writer's opinion of Gerald? First slide, pause it now and read. Second slide, pause it now and read. Third slide, pause it now and read. Okay, so let's think about this together. We have got here 5 ideas that the writer makes clear within her article. Firstly, Gerald didn't mean to hurt anyone. We're going to think about these ideas and we're going to think about to what extent we agree with the writer. Do we agree or do we disagree? Or are we mixed in our response? Do we both agree and disagree? Because that is always perfectly possible. So the fact that Gerald didn't mean to hurt anyone, didn't mean to hurt Eva, didn't mean to hurt anybody. Do we agree? Do we disagree? or are we mixed? Think about your response to that question and why you feel that way. Pause the slide if it helps you to take a moment to think, did Gerald mean to hurt anyone or not? Second idea that we find within the article, the writer says that Gerald is exploitative. He exploits people. He's untrustworthy and he's careless with the feelings of others. To what extent do we agree? Do we think he does exploit people? Is Gerald untrustworthy and is he careless with the feelings of others? Pause the slide and decide to what extent you agree with that idea. Thirdly, Gerald presents himself as the rescuer, the knight in shining armour, responding gallantly to Eva's cry for help. The idea here is that Gerald presents himself that way. It may not necessarily be true, but he presents himself as a rescuer. Again, pause the slide and think about to what extent you agree with that idea. Fourth idea. Despite being upset and wanting time alone, Gerald manages to find out that the inspector isn't a real police officer, and that they have been had. Now, is that true? To what extent do you agree or disagree with that statement? Pause the slide and make your choice. And finally, our final idea. The fairy prince is quick to forget his part in Eva's life. To what extent do we agree or disagree with that statement? Okay, let's go through this together. I'll give you my response to the writer's ideas. Again, you may disagree. He didn't mean to hurt anyone. Do I agree with that? I'm mixed. He might not have meant to hurt anyone, but let's face it, an upper-class man taking up with a lower-class girl who is potentially a prostitute, that could only have ended badly for Eva. It was never going to be a fair and equal relationship. Number two, he's exploitative, untrustworthy and careless. Yeah, absolutely. He exploits Eva. That verb install, I didn't install her there. What is she, a washing machine? He sees her as a commodity, something to be used for his own pleasure. He presents himself as the rescuer. Yes, absolutely. It's not true. He did not rescue Eva, but he certainly presents himself in that way. That is definitely how Gerald likes to think of himself. He heard her cry for help and he came gallantly forward. That's certainly how he sees himself, in my opinion. Fourthly, despite being upset and leaving the room and wanting time alone, he manages to find out that the inspector isn't a real police officer and that they have been had. I think this is really telling. I agree with this. So he says when he comes back in that he's cooled off. He's had time to think things over. Well, if he was so upset and so distraught and torn apart with grief and remorse for Eva's death, would he then have thought to go digging around and think, oh, maybe this is all a hoax? I think that shows, this is my opinion, that Gerald Croft's remorse and grief is short-lived. And then he starts to think like a cool-headed capitalist. And he starts to think of a way that he can get himself out of trouble. Lastly, the fairy prince is quick to forget his part in Eva's life. Totally. I think it's very interesting that Priestley chooses to end the play with Gerald just before the phone call, when the inspector calls again, almost re-proposing to Sheila. What about this ring? And he gets the ring out after everything he's done. Even if, the inspector is a hoax, he has cheated on his fiancée, he has committed adultery, he has told her lies, he told her that all last summer he was busy at the works, busy at business, and really he has been sleeping with a young woman that he's installed in his friend's flat. The fairy prince is very quick to forget his part in Eva's life. Okay, so that is the end of today's session. There is a quiz this week on Gerald Croft on Teams that I would like you to complete. It's also in paper form on tomorrow's resource. Okay, thanks very much, Year 10. Well done.